That was Michael Anthony, okay? 100% dedicated, never did anything to hurt those guys, and they tried to hurt him again and again and again. For Eddie to say he had to show him what to play and had to teach him all those songs, that is the biggest line of bullshit I've ever heard in my life. I was in that band for 11 years. There was never a video camera involved of Eddie showing him what to play.
After years of silence, at 70, Michael Anthony, former bassist for the legendary rock band Van Halen, has broken his silence to reveal the shocking truth about his departure from the band and his chaotic relationship with Eddie. This might come as a shock, but you need to hear it. Join us as we expose what Michael said about Eddie. Michael Anthony developed his love for music at an early age, thanks to his father, who was a trumpet player. Inspired by his father, young Michael also learned to play the trumpet during his childhood. Music was a big part of his family life, and it influenced his passion for playing instruments. Anthony was born in Chicago, Illinois, where he spent part of his early years. However, his family moved a couple of times before finally settling in Arcadia, California in 1966. Arcadia is located next to Pasadena, the hometown of Alex and Eddie Van Halen, the brothers with whom Anthony would later form the legendary rock band Van Halen. This move played a major role in shaping Anthony's future in music, as he would later meet the Van Halen brothers and become part of their band. During his school years, Anthony showed interest in both music and sports. From 1967 to 1969, he attended Dana Junior High School in Arcadia. While at Dana Junior High, he joined the school's marching band, where he continued developing his musical talents. His ability to play instruments and perform in a band setting helped him build confidence in his skills. Aside from music, Anthony was also involved in sports. He participated in track and field, demonstrating his athletic abilities. He also played baseball, where he took on the role of a catcher. His talent in sports showed promise, and he could have pursued an athletic career. However, as he grew older, his passion for music became stronger, leading him to shift his focus completely toward playing instruments instead of sports. By the time he entered high school, Anthony had made the decision to fully dedicate himself to music. He spent a lot of time practicing and improving his skills as a musician. His dedication to music became even more evident as he progressed through high school, eventually preparing him for a future in the music industry. In 1972, Anthony successfully graduated from Arcadia High School. His journey through school helped shape his musical abilities, and his early exposure to playing instruments laid the foundation for his later success. Not long after finishing high school, he would cross paths with Alex and Eddie Van Halen, eventually joining their band and making a name for himself as a bassist. But before he joined Van Halen, he had to pass through a certain stage in his life that no one could ever predict. Michael Anthony first became interested in playing the guitar as a teenager, but since most of his friends already played either the guitar or the drums, he decided to try something different, the bass guitar. One of his friends, Mike Hershey, gave him a Fender Mustang electric guitar. Instead of playing it as a regular guitar, Anthony removed the two highest strings and used it as a bass. Later, his father bought him a Victoria copy of a Fender Precision bass, along with a Gibson amplifier, which gave him a more professional setup to develop his skills. Anthony admired several famous bass players, especially Jack Bruce from the band Cream. He also looked up to Led Zeppelin's John Paul Jones and Harvey Brooks from Electric Flag. He studied their playing styles and used them as inspiration while developing his own techniques. Even though he was naturally left-handed, he learned to play the bass right-handed, a skill that set him apart from many other musicians. Anthony's musical journey started with a band called Poverty's Children. Over time, he played in several other bands, including Black Opal, Balls, and Snake. Among them, Snake was the most important band for him before he joined Van Halen. It was a three-member group where he played bass and also sang lead vocals. The band mainly performed cover songs by popular rock groups, but they also wrote and played some of their own songs. Snake and Van Halen's early band, Mammoth, often played at the same kinds of local shows. In fact, one time, Snake even opened for Mammoth at a concert at Pasadena High School. That night, Mammoth had a big problem. Their PA system stopped working. Without hesitation, Anthony stepped in and let them use Snake's PA system so they could continue their performance. Little did he know that this small act of kindness would eventually lead him to join Van Halen. His talent and generosity didn't go unnoticed, and soon after, he found himself as the bassist for one of the most legendary rock bands of all time. While studying music at Pasadena City College, Michael Anthony crossed paths with Eddie Van Halen, who was also a student there. At the same time, the Van Halen brothers band Mammoth was going through a major change. Their bass player, Mark Stone, had left the group, and they needed a replacement. Eddie and Alex Van Halen invited Anthony to jam with them and see if he would be a good fit for the band. Even though Anthony had heard them play before, he was blown away by their skill when they played together. Their energy and talent impressed him so much that he immediately knew they were something special. After the jam session, the Van Halen brothers didn't waste any time. They asked Anthony to officially join the band. Some stories suggest that Anthony first spoke with his Snake bandmate, guitarist Tony Caggiano, for advice. Caggiano reportedly told him that joining Eddie Van Halen, a rising guitar genius, would be a great move. However, Anthony himself later clarified on his website that there was no hesitation. He accepted the offer right away. Over time, this version of the story became the widely accepted one. At the time, Anthony had been planning to continue his studies at a college in Santa Barbara after finishing at Pasadena City College. However, once he became part of Van Halen, his priorities completely changed. He was so dedicated to the band that he decided to drop out of school just before earning enough credits for his degree. Instead of finishing college, he put all his energy into making music with Van Halen, a decision that would soon pay off in ways he could have never imagined. In 1974, Eddie Van Halen, Alex Van Halen, David Lee Roth, and Michael Anthony officially became known as Van Halen. They had originally performed under the name Mammoth, but after discovering that another local band was already using that name, they decided to change it. The band worked hard to make a name for themselves, performing in clubs throughout Los Angeles and West Hollywood. Their talent caught the attention of Gene Simmons from the band Kiss, who helped them record a 29-track demo. Their big break came in 1977 when they signed a record deal with Warner Brothers. The following year, on February 10, 1978, they released their first album, Van Halen, which introduced them to the world. At the start, Anthony was considered a full member of the band, sharing 20% of the band's debts and earnings, including money made from merchandise. The band's manager, Noel Monk, was also included in this financial structure. However, things took a turn for Anthony in 1984 when tensions within the band escalated. During the 1984 album tour, David Lee Roth and the Van Halen brothers pressured Anthony into signing away all his future songwriting credits and royalties. The agreement was made retroactively, meaning Anthony also lost financial rights to the band's 1984 album. According to Noel Monk, the situation was unfair. He later wrote that if he had been in Anthony's position, he would have refused and even skipped the performance that night to make a statement. Instead, Anthony didn't argue. He just signed the papers, losing millions of dollars in the process while the other three band members stood over him. Despite the challenges, Anthony remained with Van Halen for many years. The band released 11 studio albums between 1978 and 1998, along with a live album in 1993 and 2 greatest hits compilations during Anthony's time in the band. Apart from Van Halen, Anthony also supported other musicians. In 1988, he helped produce a demo for his brother, Bobby Lee's band, Asylum Suite. This band had been active since 1984 and featured lead singer Michael Thomas Fiore. Anthony's contribution helped them refine their sound and move forward in their musical journey. As early as 1996, there were rumors that Michael Anthony had been fired from Van Halen. However, despite these claims, Anthony continued to work with the band. The rumors never completely stopped, and they followed him for years until he finally left the band for good after the 2004 reunion tour with Sammy Hagar. Anthony's role in the band had already started to decline by the time Van Halen recorded their 1998 album, Van Halen 3. Unlike previous albums where he played bass on all tracks, his involvement in this one was much smaller. He only played bass on 3 songs, while Eddie Van Halen took over the bass duties for 6 other songs. Even though his contributions were limited, Anthony was still credited as a songwriter for the album, along with the rest of the band. After the album was released, Anthony joined the band for their 1998 tour and was still acknowledged in band announcements. He was also part of 3 reunion attempts with David Lee Roth. in 1996, 2000, and 2001. The last of these reunions even led to early versions of songs that would later appear on A Different Kind of Truth. During this time, Anthony's name appeared in band newsletters, and he was included in a few interviews with the band. However, after that period, Anthony seemed to disappear from the public eye. He was not actively seen or heard from in connection with Van Halen for a long time. It wasn't until the 2004 reunion tour that he made a final return to the band before officially leaving. After leaving Van Halen, Michael Anthony started playing with Sammy Hagar more often during Hagar's solo tours. He performed as part of two of Hagar's bands, the Wabaritas and Los Tres Gusanos. In 2002, Hagar and David Lee Roth went on tour together in what was called the Sans Halen, or Sam and Dave tour. During this tour, Anthony made surprise guest appearances at some concerts. He wasn't the only former Van Halen member to do so. Gary Cherone, another past vocalist for the band, also joined in at times. Occasionally, Anthony and Cherone even performed together on stage. That same year, Anthony teamed up with Hagar, Neil Schon, Dean Castronovo, and Joe Satriani to form a new band called Planet Us. This supergroup allowed him to perform even more frequently with Hagar. Planet Us recorded two songs, one of which, Psycho Vertigo, was originally meant to be included on the Spider-Man movie soundtrack. However, in the end, the song was not featured on the album. The second song, Peephole, along with Psycho Vertigo, was eventually released on Hagar's 2008 solo album, Cosmic Universal Fashion. At the end of 2003, Eddie and Alex Van Halen decided to bring Sammy Hagar back into the band for a 2004 tour. However, their original plan did not include Michael Anthony. They wanted to move forward without him. When Hagar found out, he refused to participate unless Anthony was also brought back. Because of this, the Van Halen brothers had no choice but to let Anthony return. However, there was a catch. Anthony had to accept a new contract with reduced royalties. This contract only lasted for the duration of the tour, meaning Anthony was no longer a permanent member of the band. In 2004, Van Halen released a compilation album called The Best of Both Worlds. The album included some of their greatest hits, as well as 3 brand new songs. However, Anthony was not involved in writing or recording these new songs. He didn't play bass on them, and his name was not credited for any of the new material. The only thing he contributed was backup vocals on all 3 tracks. In recent interviews, Anthony has revealed that he has not spoken to Eddie or Alex Van Halen since the 2004 tour. The only time he had any contact with them was when he briefly saw Alex at the funeral of Van Halen's drum technician, Greg Emerson. Anthony has also shared his thoughts on why his relationship with the Van Halen brothers fell apart. He believes that their dislike of Sammy Hagar's business ventures, such as his Cabo Wabo tequila brand, may have played a role. Since Anthony also started his own business, selling his hot sauce brand, he thinks that this might have upset the Van Halen brothers, leading to the final split between him and the band. In the summer of 2006, Michael Anthony went on tour with Sammy Hagar as part of a band called The Other Half. This group featured Anthony and Hagar performing classic Van Halen songs, covering music from both the David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar eras of the band. However, in September 2006, Eddie Van Halen made a big announcement. He had decided to replace Anthony with his own son, Wolfgang Van Halen, as Van Halen's new bass player. Then, in February 2007, Van Halen announced they would be going on a new tour with their original lead singer, David Lee Roth. The tour started on September 27, 2007. Anthony later revealed that he only found out about being replaced through the internet. He expressed his frustration, saying he was not happy that they were calling it a Van Halen reunion. He felt that a real reunion would include all the original members, not just some of them. At the official tour press conference, David Lee Roth agreed, stating that this tour was not a reunion, but a revision. Despite being left out of the tour, Anthony continued performing with Hagar. On February 25, 2007, the two musicians appeared together on live national television during a pre-race show for a NASCAR event. During the broadcast, Anthony suddenly jumped on stage and performed Hagar's hit song, I Can't Drive 55, alongside him. A few weeks later, on March 12, 2007, Van Halen was officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. However, the event was not attended by most of the band members. Eddie Van Halen was in rehab at the time, while Alex Van Halen and David Lee Roth chose not to appear. However, only Michael Anthony and Sammy Hagar showed up to accept the honor, making them the only former or current members of Van Halen present at the ceremony. After leaving Van Halen, Michael Anthony continued his music career by forming a new band with his longtime friend, Sammy Hagar. This band, called Chickenfoot, also included legendary guitarist Joe Satriani and Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer Chad Smith. Anthony played bass guitar and sang backing vocals for the group. Chickenfoot released their first studio album on June 5, 2009 in Europe, and a few days later, on June 9, 2009, in North America. The album was well received, and fans were excited to hear Anthony and Hagar making music together again. The band continued working on new material, and on September 27, 2011, they released their second album, titled Chickenfoot 3. A few years later, in 2014, Anthony became part of another supergroup called Sammy Hagar and The Circle. This band featured Sammy Hagar as the lead singer, Vic Johnson as the guitarist, and Jason Bonham on drums. With this band, Anthony continued to perform classic rock songs, including hits from Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, and Hagar's solo career. Michael Anthony and Eddie Van Halen shared a complex and evolving relationship throughout their time together in Van Halen. Anthony, the band's bassist, was known for his solid playing and distinctive backing vocals, which became a hallmark of the group's sound. Despite their musical synergy, personal and professional tensions often marred their association. In the early years, Anthony's contributions were integral to the band's success. However, as time progressed, internal dynamics shifted. During the 2004 reunion tour with Sammy Hagar, Anthony was reportedly asked to relinquish his licensing rights and accept a pay cut to participate. This period highlighted growing strains between him and the Van Halen brothers. The situation further deteriorated when Eddie replaced Anthony with his son, Wolfgang Van Halen, in 2006. This decision effectively ended Anthony's tenure with the band and deepened the rift between him and Eddie. Reflecting on this period, Anthony expressed regret that he and Eddie never reconciled before the guitarist's death in 2020, noting unresolved issues that continued to trouble him. Despite the professional disagreements, Anthony found some solace after Eddie's passing. He reconnected with Wolfgang Van Halen, attending a performance of Wolfgang's band, Mammoth WVH, in 2023. This meeting provided Anthony with a sense of closure, allowing him to honor the musical legacy he shared with Eddie while mending ties with the Van Halen family. However, while Michael Anthony and Eddie Van Halen's relationship was marked by both collaboration and conflict, efforts made after Eddie's death have helped to heal some of the lingering wounds, underscoring the enduring impact of their shared musical journey. While this was part of the reason Michael Anthony exposed most things he knew about Eddie, was it to free it off his chest or for speculation's sake? Nobody knows. What everyone cares about is that he finally let the cat out of the bag. Michael Anthony, who played bass for Van Halen for many years, recently shared his thoughts on why he left the famous rock band. His departure has been a topic of discussion for a long time, with many fans wondering what really happened. Now, Anthony is speaking openly about the personal and professional issues that led to his exit. One major reason for the tension was the way Eddie Van Halen treated him. According to Anthony, Eddie often criticized his skills as a musician and singer. Eddie would tell him that he wasn't good enough and needed to be shown exactly what to play. Anthony recalled that Eddie used to say that he had to tell him every note to play. These constant negative comments hurt Anthony's confidence over time. Anthony admitted that it made it look like Eddie never believed in him. He explained that it wasn't just about playing music. Eddie's criticism started to feel personal. Anthony felt like no matter how hard he tried, he was never seen as good enough in Eddie's eyes. This difficult relationship played a big part in why he eventually left the band. According to Anthony, Eddie even told him that if he ever left the band, his career would be over. These words hurt, but he refused to let them break his spirit. Despite Eddie's harsh words, Anthony's love for music remained strong. He admitted that he has been playing music all through his life, and he won't let another person's opinion ruin it for him. He wanted to keep doing what he loved, no matter what anyone said. Even though many people assumed he left Van Halen to join Chickenfoot, Anthony made it clear that it was not the case. According to Anthony, the situation in the band had simply become too difficult. The tensions with Eddie and other internal issues made it clear that things were no longer working out. He wasn't given a choice to leave on his own terms. Instead, it felt like he was being pushed out. After the fallout, he started working on side projects with Sammy Hagar, which eventually led to the formation of Chickenfoot. However, Anthony insists that starting Chickenfoot was never about leaving Van Halen. He and Sammy were simply looking for a way to enjoy making music again. He wanted to move forward, not because he was abandoning Van Halen, but because he still had a passion for playing. However, Anthony remained dedicated to his music, proving that he didn't need Van Halen to continue his career. Despite the difficult experiences with Eddie, he chose to focus on what mattered most, his love for playing bass and making music. Looking back on his time with Van Halen, Anthony chooses to focus on the positive. He expressed gratitude for the years he spent with the band and the music they created together. Anthony's departure from Van Halen may not have been on his own terms, but he has continued to pursue his passion for music. Even after the difficult experiences with Eddie and the band, he remains focused on what he loves most, playing bass and creating music. Michael Anthony experienced a strained relationship with Eddie Van Halen, the band's guitarist. This tension eventually led to Anthony's departure from the group. The discord between Anthony and Eddie became evident during Van Halen's 2004 tour. Reports suggest that Eddie's struggles with substance abuse and disagreements over Sammy Hagar's promotion of his Cabo Wabo tequila brand contributed to a tense atmosphere. It was during this period Anthony was reportedly forced to relinquish his licensing rights to the band's name and accept a pay cut, indicating a decline in his relationship with the Van Halen brothers. In 2006, the situation went further when Eddie replaced Anthony with his son, Wolfgang Van Halen. This move was unexpected for Anthony and felt like a betrayal, as he had been a long-standing member of the band. Eddie justified the replacement by suggesting that Anthony had effectively left the band to collaborate with Sammy Hagar on outside projects. Despite the professional fallout, Anthony expressed regret that he and Eddie never reconciled before Eddie's death in 2020. In an interview, Anthony mentioned that they actually hadn't spoken and unfortunately they didn't get a chance to. And it bothers him because they had some issues that were never resolved. This means that the relationship between Michael Anthony and Eddie Van Halen was marked by professional disagreements and personal misunderstandings. These issues led to Anthony's departure from the band and remained unresolved until Eddie's passing. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.